Well, good morning, Adrian. Welcome to the latest podcast in our series for the Academy for Online Counselling and Psychotherapy. And very delighted to welcome you, Adrian Rhodes, to this podcast. And perhaps, Adrian, you'd like to start by just briefly explaining a little bit about yourself.
I'm a psychoanalytic psychotherapist working now in private practice. So I did work in the NHS, working with democratic therapeutic community work with people with personality disorders. I've also been reasonably active in the political sphere of psychotherapy. I was vice chair of UKCP, but I was also the president of the European Association for Psychotherapy, which is the professional body of professional bodies within Europe. I guess that's enough.
Sounds pretty good to me. I'm just a mere little underling compared with all that. So anyway, welcome. And today we're going to be discussing from your psychoanalytic point of view, the role of the online therapy relationship. And there's a big discussion about whether online therapy is the same, different, or whatever. There are pages full of blogs on the subject. And I'm very interested in the blog that you wrote on the pwtacademy.online blog, which is musings on online therapy, speaking from their world, their space in which they choose. So that is the frame within which we're talking today. And, well, Adrian, perhaps you'd like to kick off with a few thoughts, and then we can turn that into a conversation.
Yes, I've been aware of this, of the discussion, particularly in the analytic world and in the relational school of psychotherapy, about whether online therapy is possible even, or whether it's a limited form of therapy. I've been aware of this discussion, and of course, it's troubled me, and it's given me the need to think quite carefully about it, because there are some very clever and important people who are concerned about whether you can do psychotherapy, analytic psychotherapy, online. For example, Gillian Isaac Russell is particularly concerned about this. And yet the research shows that some clients find online therapy extremely powerful, and they find it works for them, and they, in some areas, find that it is more effective than face-to-face therapy. So, how do you put these two together? And I guess that what I came to the conclusion about was that we are doing ourselves a disservice when we're thinking about online therapy if we think about it as being merely different from face-to-face, or if we think of it as a sub-branch of face-to-face therapy, as some sort of second-rate or defective or alternative to face-to-face therapy. And I thought to myself, well, over the decades that psychotherapy has been evolving, we have moved from from meeting people face to face to all sorts of other expressions of psychoanalytic psychotherapy, such as group work or couples therapy, or indeed any sort of different from face-to-face work. And it occurred to me that online work is rather like that. We need to rethink our principles. Just as in group therapy, we still, in group therapy, think about the core principles, the core dynamics, the core techniques of analytic psychotherapy, but we express them differently, we use them differently, and we find different ways in group therapy of thinking about meeting with people. And so it's developed its own way of working, its own philosophy, its own techniques, its own theoretical perspective. So I think that with online work, we need to start thinking that online therapy is in fact a new expression, a different expression of psychotherapy, and not just this cut-down version of face-to-face work.
Yes, I think the word you use is distinct.
Fine, distinct. I think that's it.
Yes.
I'll stay with that.
I find that quite comfortable, hearing that, because it makes me think, I suppose, about driving. You know, when we drive a car, we drove a motorbike. My driving license allows me to do all sorts of things, but actually, driving a motorcycle is quite distinct from driving a car, and yet I have a license for both.
And the highway code applies to both.
Exactly. But I wouldn't dream of getting on a motorbike without thinking about it in a lot of detail. I still got the evidence on my leg from when I did last get on one, and proof that I'd need some extra training in that probably if I was going to go that direction. Adrian, I'm interested in your quoting of Gillian Isaac's book, Screen Relations, which is another Carnac book. There was an article which she wrote recently, which I'll put up the reference up in the notes, in which she quotes, "Embodied shared experience is being sacrificed in both our personal and work lives for the economy and convenience of screen relations." How does that fit with you? You know, I'm quite interested in this idea of whether we lose the sense of the body in the work we're doing online.
I think there's a lot of truth in what she says. She speaks an awful lot about presence, about being in the presence of someone. And she speaks about, she quotes in her book, a patient who says that when the patient is sat with a therapist, she can either kiss or kill the therapist in the room, but she can't do that online. And that's true. But the difficulty is that people live online now. It frames the way in which people discourse with each other. It starts to structure how people think about themselves in the world. And people do an awful lot of their dynamic unfolding, their developmental work in an online setting now. Whereas before we did all of our developmental work in face-to-face work, now people do it online. And online they are often freer. Free association is much more evident. People fantasize about themselves. They are freed from the conventions of face-to-face work. And so they express themselves in the online world in a very different way. And so it seems that psychoanalysis needs to develop understanding, tools, techniques to walk alongside people as they express themselves in the online setting, because it's only going to get more and more prominent. People now, digital natives, are living online worlds that my generation didn't even dream of when we were young. And psychoanalysis needs to walk with people where the people are, instead of expecting people to come to where we are. Because by doing that, we are doing ourselves and our clients a real disservice.
Yes, I really like this image of the walking alongside, which is one I use quite often in the therapy work I do. And I know, Adrian, you're a real craftsman on the words, and you know that you really enjoy working via email, for example, and live chat. And I recently was interviewed by, I think it was a Regent's College student, about body language in live chat, which I find quite challenging to think about. And what I love in the work we're doing online is the way that it's extending the way we think, it's challenging us to look at our bodies, to think about how we're using them. And I'm wondering what experience you've had of this, both in email therapy and maybe in live chat.
Yes, I struggle a bit with live chat because there's a bit of me that, as you say, I do like working with words. And so there's a bit of me that's a bit OCD. So I tend to find that when I'm doing live chat, I get caught up in trying to correct my spelling mistakes. So I sometimes distract myself a bit more in live chat. But in live chat, both live chat and email therapy, there is much more self-reflection. Um, in me when I am doing that work. I am much more attuned to myself, how I experience the material that's coming through. In other words, the countertransference. I'm much more attuned to my body, for example, and what it does to me. That reading something that someone in live chat just puts up there and it churns my stomach, or it makes me feel tight in the chest, or it somehow raises the hairs on the back of my arm. I'm much more attuned to myself and what these words are doing, what they're doing to me now. Or in terms of email work, when I receive an email, I let it work in somewhere in the back of my head before responding to an email. Therapy. So it is much more about allowing the material to work within me and seeing what that does to me and seeing what it evokes in me before I respond.
And we are just drawing to a close, but I wanted to just sort of comment on, actually, I've noticed that when people are working via either with a video turned off, so on audio, or via live chat, quite a lot of my clients will ask me to turn the video off when they want to talk about issues of shame, even though we've got a face-to-face or a visual relationship when it comes to certain issues. And I've also noticed that we deal with issues much more quickly in a non-visual format.
That's right. People are far more open. The sort of what is technically called the disinhibition effect means that people are very ready to be open and the defenses are down. So people are much more open online. And so we can get to the material very quickly. Whereas when people have to come here into my therapy space, they're very often defended. They very often have to prepare themselves and fit themselves into my setting, my world, my room, my ethos, how they imagine I expect them to be. Whereas when we meet online in their space or in the space in between, they can be themselves, free to express themselves as they are. And that allows us to get in there. And after all, psychoanalysis started with the idea of getting inside people, inside their lives, their hearts, their minds, where they are. And the sadness, it seems to me, is that we've lost in psychoanalytic world, we've lost that passion for exploring within the realm of the patient's world. We want to bring them into ours to make it safe. And that's the sadness. The online world is so much more exciting to work in.
I absolutely love it. I have to admit, I got very bored working face to face and I found it very isolating. And I have to say that I somehow woke up when I trained to work online. So I'm delighted to hear you say that. And Adrian, we need to wrap up now. So I'd like to thank you very much for this podcast, which will be on the pwtacademy.online website. And you'll be able to view it. And there will be some notes to go with this. And all it remains is for me to say thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.